Today we have the honor to discuss with Hesham Youssef, former ambassador of Egypt and co-founder of Diplomats, on the most recent developments in the Middle East and the concrete risks of a wider war in the region. Over the past weeks, we have seen some important developments in Lebanon, the killing of Nasrallah, bombings in Beirut, and the beginning of a ground operation in the country. So, Dr. Youssef, how do you assess the current developments in Lebanon? And what could be the main implications on the Lebanese political system and on the future of the country?
Well, thank you very much for having me. The situation in Lebanon, even before the Israeli attack, was quite dire. On the political front, there is no president. On the economic front, the situation has been extremely difficult for a number of years, starting from the explosion that took place in the Beirut port. So it is coming at a time that is already quite difficult for the Lebanese people. And as Amos Hochstein, the US envoy who was working on trying to advance the prospect of peace and stability in Lebanon between Israelis and Lebanese, he sent a message to the Israelis on visiting his last visit to Israel, saying that if you have a war, after the war, you will reach the package that I am presenting to you today. But there were no Israelis who are willing to listen to him at the time. They said, well, thank you very much. We will continue on our path. And this is very unfortunate because we have seen before in the war in 2006 and in military confrontations that were of a minor nature since then, that the situation is getting from bad to worse. Despite the fact that there were some glimmers of hope in the middle. And this is reflected in the maritime agreement that the United States was able to broker between Israel and Lebanon, and it was seen as a positive step that could advance the prospects of peace. And he was working on additional issues pertaining to the land border between Israel and Lebanon, and this would have been a major breakthrough had this been agreed. Now we have a setback. And now the situation in Lebanon is quite unstable, and it will have dire consequences if it continues for a longer period of time. Israel said that this would be limited and for a short period of time. But we have seen the war on Gaza that started after the 7th of October, and it is approaching 1 year now. And there is no clarity as to how this would end and whether it would end quickly. Of course, you can aim at ending it quickly, but this doesn't mean that this would be achieved. So there are huge concerns. And then with the involvement also between Israel and Iran and the attack that took place a few days back, and an anticipated response from Israel on the Iranian attack, the situation will become much more complicated. So this can result in a vicious circle of attacks between Israel and Iran that can take the region into a further deterioration that would affect the instability of the region to an extent that is becoming much more difficult to address. We haven't even stopped the war on Gaza, and the war on Lebanon will continue, and then the confrontation with Iran will continue. And this is a recipe for major instability rather than a recipe for progress in advancing peace or stability or any form of calm in the region, and which is very unfortunate.
Thank you, Ambassador. Moving to Egypt, we have seen your country emerging as a major negotiator of the conflict between Israel and the Hamas. How the risk of escalation between Iran and Israel could affect the negotiation between Hamas and Israel for finding a solution for hostages and a solution for the future of Gaza?
Well, what we have seen in the last few weeks is that there has been maybe some form of suspension of negotiations in relation to ending the war on Gaza. And after many months of work on all kinds of proposals, where the United States in different stages have been quite optimistic that the war would be ending, and at a very high level, including President Biden himself, saying at several occasions, we're very close, we expect to reach an agreement within a few days and so on, and this has been the case for several months. With the war on Lebanon starting and with Israel saying that it shifted its focus from the war on Gaza to the war on Lebanon, then the situation becomes even worse for the prospects of reaching a ceasefire with the help of Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. Sadly, we don't hear any efforts on that front. The United States indicated at one point in time, a few weeks back, that it is working on a new proposal that it will be presenting to Egypt and Qatar to try to persuade Hamas to accept it. But then we have silence since then. And all the efforts that have taken place in the last few months came to a stop. I hope that this will not continue for much longer because the situation in Gaza continues to be extremely dire. The war on Gaza did not stop. The humanitarian situation is probably one of the worst in the world, with suffering that is unprecedented, that has been there for a very long time. And we've seen situations related to starvation, famine, polio, all kinds of difficulties and problems on the humanitarian front, but also on the security and stability front. And this is not sustainable. And the result of that would be a huge move towards further extremism, radicalization in the region, and this would not be to the benefit of anybody.
Thank you, Ambassador Youssef.
Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure to be here.